This is Sports Radio 1560 The Fan, WLZR Melbourne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Nach on Sports podcast, brought to you by sportsradio1560.com. Today on the podcast, we will be discussing the national championship in men's basketball. And don't worry, everyone, while your bracket may have been busted after the second round, mine remained intact. We'll also recap the entire NCAA tournament with my friend Trey Cochran, who is the Wisconsin Lutheran College defensive backs coach. You can follow him on Twitter at Trey Cochran. And let's get him on. Trey, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, Nach. Thanks again for having me on.
Not a problem, buddy. Listen, I know the Wisconsin Lutheran College Warriors, they celebrated conference championship. You guys got some rings and some pretty fancy hardware to go with it. Can you tell me, what was the ring ceremony like?
Yeah, no, thanks for giving us a shout-out on that. It was awesome getting the guys together for our ring ceremony the other week after they got back from spring break, had everyone get together. Had some pizza and Gatorade, brought everyone together, had our athletic director, head coaches, and everybody there to kind of commemorate the season one more time. Went through, watched a little highlight tape put together by our defensive coordinator, and it was just cool to see the seniors get to come back together with the guys one last time before they're kind of sent off into the sunset and we prepare for next season.
Now, Trey, I got to ask you, man, I've seen the rings on the website. Now, I know you like to go out, you like to have a good time, just like me. I got to ask you, man, has a woman come up to you, and have you worn that ring out in public, and has a woman come up to you and asked you which Super Bowl team you're on?
Oh, no, you're funny, man. No, I actually have not wore the ring out. I'm waiting for kind of that right moment in time. I'm hoping we can get together with the coaches to do something and wear it out in public. It is pretty big. You know, I never realized how big those championship rings and whatnot people have. I would say that most individuals probably just larger than me too, so they don't look as big on them. But man, that thing looks huge on me. It's pretty gaudy. It's sitting on my desk at home, opened up right there, so I see it every morning. But I haven't worn out yet. Maybe what I'll do is wait till you come in town, okay, and we can take turns wearing it. Okay? All
right, that's fair. I appreciate that. You're looking out for me because let's face it, if I had gotten that ring, I would have already worn out the public. I would have gone to singles night and say, "Ma'am, I'm part of the 2002 Buccaneers championship." Well, it doesn't say. Don't look at what it says. It just says it's a ring.
You know, I was thinking about wearing it down to Indianapolis for the Final Four games this past weekend, but, you know, it's green, it's shiny. I didn't want people getting confused and asking me questions about possibly the Sparty or anything like that. That would have been a little awkward. So I've kept it at my house on my desk. I tried putting it on my necklace and my chain for a second there, but like I said, it's too big. So it's just sitting there. I'm being humble about it right now, but like I said, you come in town, we'll polish it up, we'll take it out, okay?
Sounds like a plan. Speaking of you being able to go to the Final Four, you got a chance to go down there and enjoy the games. Let's talk about the Monday night game. Did you actually get to go to that one, or did you only go to the Michigan State game?
I was there for the games on Saturday, so the session one, the semifinal games. I wasn't down there for the game on Monday. I would have been if my Spartans could have pulled it off earlier in the weekend against Duke, but I didn't go down to the game on Monday. I did watch it, though. Finished up the whole tournament and the roller coaster that was the tournament for me emotionally as a Michigan State fan. And then at the end, I was rooting for Wisconsin, the Badgers, trying to represent the Big Ten there.
Well, we'll get to your trip then in a moment, because like I said, I know you. You make a lot of great trips over the years I've known you. But let's talk about the game Monday night. I felt like, and we discussed this a little bit on Twitter, you know, obviously you never blame the refs for a loss. You just can't. But at the same time, I'll tell you what, man, the refs had a hand in the loss for Wisconsin.
You know, and despite what I was maybe tweeting out, and you probably saw some of that on Monday night and whatnot, I'm one of the individuals that I don't like blaming refs for a game, whether we're mid-game and my guys are playing in a football game and we say, hey, you got to ignore the refs, you got to play your game. You can only control what you can control type of thing, because if you let that get into your mindset and your mentality, it affects the way you play, and that's the one thing you can control. So let's try to affect and control how we play. So I don't like to do that, but I will say after that game, that particular game on Monday, I just had a bad taste in my mouth after that game, feeling like something was maybe taken away from the quality of the game, or just from the experience of it, from the whole tournament too. I mean, it was such a great tournament, and looking back on it, there was different points where I think the reffing came into play. in games and maybe made decisions that were either wrong or they made one that they should have held their whistle on, things like that. And the fact that I'm even thinking about the refs having an impact on the tournament at the very end of it before one shining moment comes on just has, leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't want to be thinking about them ever. They should be seen, not heard. You shouldn't have to contemplate that and think about that. But it was just such a drastic change from the first half to the second half, how fouls were called and how that happened, that it just kind of did leave me with a bad taste. I'm going to say that Wisconsin had many times an opportunity to put that game away, to win that game outright, even with those calls. So I'm not going to blame the refs. It's just unfortunate that I think there was some obvious missed calls at the end there that should have been made the other way.
No, I totally agree with you, Trey. We're here with Trey Cochran, defensive backs coach from Wisconsin Lutheran College, and we're talking about the national championship game Monday night in which the Badgers and the Duke Blue Devils, played against each other. Duke obviously coming out on top, winning the national championship. Coach K wins his fifth. He must have had a great year. Got his 1,000th win in Division I, and he gets a national championship this year. Trey, talk about what Duke. I mean, I don't like talking about Duke, but Duke, you got to give them credit where it's due. They win again, and he did it with 2 or 3 freshman guards.
Yeah, and those guards are awesome. I'm not going to take anything away from that. Those guards made big shots, too. It's not just that there was missed calls, whether it's an out-of-bounds call going the other way a couple of times or maybe some calls at the rim, but they made big shots, and they're incredible. They had some good freshmen on that team. And, kudos to Coach K for still reloading his his recruiting classes every year, knowing that he might lose 1 or 2 guys to the NBA sooner than he would like. It seems like he always has the best balance. It seems like he's got a couple of seniors and program guys that make their way into a starting lineup every year, and then he's always got that McDonald's All-American, All-Star who's going to be a force in the NBA type of player in the starting lineup as well, maybe as a freshman. And he does a really good job mixing that. I think you have 2 different extremes that you saw in the tournament. You had Wisconsin and Michigan State, who traditionally have program players. They stay there 3 or 4 years, and then they might go to the NBA and go on to different careers and things like that. But then you have Kentucky and Duke, who I think a lot of people see them as bringing in new recruiting classes every year with a lot of McDonald's All-Americans and whatnot. Kentucky loses guys faster, I think, and they reload faster. But Duke always has that senior, whether it's Cook or someone else, and I think we're on like the 18th Plumlee on their team. I mean, it's just crazy how they go through with it. So you got to give respect to Coach K for doing that every year, knowing he's going to lose a couple guys, but then still bringing in guys to his program who he knows he can rely on for 4 years. So all the respect in the world to Coach K, his big milestones this year, and his team, and they definitely played well enough to win that game. And those guards, like you said, they played out of their minds. It was awesome to watch.
Well, that's good. Let's go back to that as well. We had a great national championship game, regardless of who you were a fan of, who you wanted to win the game. The game itself was an incredible game. You had 13 lead changes by halftime. That's just incredible. That's what you want out of every college basketball big game that you can find. And the Final Four games really lived up to the billing. Those were really good games. I'm being nice to your Spartans, Trey, but but like I said, it was a great Final Four. It was a great tournament overall. What did you feel about this NCAA tournament? I felt it was like one of the best ones in the past 5 years.
The second day of the tournament, so that would have been that first Friday of games, mid-March there, I was just sitting there watching the games, and I just said, man, this is so awesome. I'm so thankful that I'm able to just witness everything that's going on. I mean, by game 3 of the first day, Nach, my bracket was destroyed, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. You will go from 11 million brackets on ESPN, and within the first 3 games of a tournament that lasts a month, 90% of them are already all messed up. I mean, that's the coolest thing. It was an awesome tournament. I think there was a lot of good storylines. Within the tournament, you had your traditional powerhouses in storied programs. You had your underdogs. You had Michigan State as a 7th seed making it to the Final Four, the second 7th seed 2 years in a row that's made it to the Final Four. And then you've got 3 number 1 seeds, huge, big-time programs and big conferences that are there. I think it was the perfect combination of it all. I was extremely pleased with the tournament overall. Like I said, at the end, just a couple of calls by those refs. I think the 2 out-of-bounds plays were the ones that stood out the most to everybody, especially after watching the replays. And I think the head of officiating came out yesterday and said, yeah, one of those calls was missed and whatnot. It just kind of leaves you with that taste. Like, I wish it didn't go that way. And, Duke, maybe they still win the game. But it was a 5-point game and ended up winning by. So it's a lot closer than if those calls go the other way and it doesn't have an impact on the game. So overall, very happy with the tournament. Like I said, ecstatic that my bracket was broken within the first 3 games because I knew we were in store for some awesome storylines in tournament games there moving forward.
We're here with Trey Cochran, defensive backs coach from Wisconsin Lutheran College. You can follow him on Twitter at Trey Cochran. We're talking about the NCAA tournament, the national championship game played this past Monday night. The Duke Blue Devils crowned champions for the 5th time under Coach K. Just talking about the tournament overall and what an exciting tournament. Trey, what was one of your favorite teams from the field? I know you're a Spartan guy, but what was the other team that maybe you went in, you weren't really thinking about it, you weren't even really rooting for, and you were like, you know what, I really jumped on the bandwagon for their run, like a Georgia State team. What kind of team did you look out there and you thought, you know what, I really like this team?
Well, obviously, like you said, my Spartans, I'm with them the whole way in the tournament. I'm following that region very closely as we work through. One team that I thought was going to really come out of that East region was Villanova. Just watching them in the Big East this year and how they were really handling teams, I just thought they came in the tournament with so much momentum, and they get knocked off by NC State. So then at that moment, NC State kind of became a team I was rooting for, and then they got knocked off by Louisville. And then we were playing Louisville, so I had to, turn into someone that was rooting against Louisville just like that. So those dynamics, like I said, so awesome to watch. I will say that throughout the whole tournament, I was rooting for Wisconsin coming out of that West Regional just to make it to the Final Four again. I think it's awesome that they made a pack versus Kentucky, rematch of last year. Then you have Duke making it back to the Final Four as well. So I wanted some of those matchups again to happen. I really wanted that Wisconsin-Kentucky matchup, and it happened. So when Kentucky was playing teams like your Notre Dame and having close games versus them, West Virginia not so close. I was rooting for Kentucky to win, even though I think everybody else was rooting for them to lose. I wanted that matchup between Kentucky and Wisconsin. So outside of Michigan State, that was probably what I was looking forward to the most. And being there for that game on Saturday to watch that game, that might have been one of the best basketball games I've ever seen played in person or on TV. There was back and forth in that game, the emotions back and forth. It was eerie how Kentucky fans outnumbered everyone in the stadium that night, but I think they were more nervous than anybody. And I say that because Kentucky would simply make a good pass or maybe get a layup or whatnot, and 2 points was cheered like it was the final score of a game every time. And Wisconsin's demeanor from their fans, their coach, their players was a lot more calm, and I think that's why they won the game. I think those teams were very evenly matched, but I think it was their demeanor, and maybe it was just from the experience and their maturity levels that ended up being the factor. But hands down, that was one of the best basketball games I've ever seen in my life.
Let me ask you this then. Would you say, obviously we know what happened with the national championship, but which game do you think was better in those two games? Was it the Wisconsin-Kentucky or the Wisconsin-Duke game?
Wisconsin-Kentucky, like I said, I think that's one of the best basketball games I've ever seen. Kentucky coming in undefeated. First team to ever post, I think it was, 38-0 or 39-0 leading into that or whatnot in the history of college basketball. Wisconsin coming in for the rematch after last year with the player of the year, some upperclassmen. That was the storyline, and that it fit the bill with how they play the game. Wisconsin-Duke in the national championship, awesome game. Not going to take away from that. It had my attention the whole time. Both of those games were a lot better than my Spartans against Duke in the first semifinal game, so I will be very honest with that. But Kentucky-Wisconsin, that's going to probably be my biggest memory of the tournament. Maybe it's because I was there. I'm a little biased, but I definitely was watching that game, was just like, this is quality basketball. This is fun to watch, and the emotions were just insane. So that was my favorite game of the tournament.
I'd have to agree with you, and I don't think there's a lot of people in the land that would disagree. That Kentucky-Wisconsin game was great because you had everything. I mean, Wisconsin didn't lead out. I mean, they had a lead, they gave it up, and then they had a lead again, they gave it up, and then it came down to the final few seconds, the final few possessions, which were so key. So I don't think I think a lot of people would agree with you, Trey, regardless of whether you were there or whether you were just watching it at home like I was. I mean, that was an awesome game. That was a great game. But let me ask you this. Let's transition this a little bit. Obviously, we're going to talk about some players now, maybe moving on. Let me ask you this. You got a chance. You're in Big Ten country. Tom Izzo's put a lot of praise on Mr. Frank the Tank. Do you see a Frank Kaminsky transitioning into the NBA? I mean, this guy looks like at least a poor man's Dirk Nowitzki to me.
Yeah, no, I think Frank is going to have, at the very least, and everyone has their opinions on what's a successful NBA career. Well, you know what? I think if you're in the NBA for 5 to 10 years and you're making millions of dollars a year, that's a successful career, barring injury and things like that. If you're on a roster, if you're contributing to a team, now that versus being an all-star, that's a big difference. Let's look at the all-stars in the NBA. We're talking about players like Steph Curry and Westbrook and LeBron and all these big-name guys. I mean, those are insane players that control every game. Do I see Frank Kaminsky going out there and controlling every game? Maybe not, but I don't know how many times Dirk even did that. And look, he's going to be a Hall of Famer down the road. So Frank, I think, has a skill set, can shoot the ball well enough to bring guys out from the basket, but everyone can in the NBA, so he's going to fit in well. And obviously he's got size. He can't teach size. I think he's been coached very well too, so he's going to buy into a system he plays in, and he's going to work hard. So I think his outlook is good, which means I think he's going to have a good long career in the NBA and make a career out of it for him and his family.
We're here with Trey Cochran, defensive backs coach from Wisconsin Lutheran College. Trey, my final question to you kind of turns the table. We're now putting college basketball behind us. You're getting ready for spring practices for Wisconsin Lutheran and their football team. I've got to ask you about, the Michigan State Spartans. Their team that I can see they're going to be ranked in the top 10 again. And for football, they're going into spring practice. What are you guys looking at? I mean, what are you hearing coming out of Michigan State?
Well, yeah, it's just an exciting now time of the year when you transition from March Madness into spring ball for college football. You got your NFL teams that are going to be reporting to their OTAs and everything here around the corner. Then you have the NFL draft coming up. So this is another good time of the year. I'm just waiting for hopefully some warmer weather up here in Wisconsin so I can actually feel like spring and summer right around the corner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited about Michigan State season coming up here. Obviously, the big key for us is Connor Cook's returning. He's won a Rose Bowl and then Cotton Bowl, 2 top 5 finishes back-to-back years. So whenever you have a quarterback, your outlook is going to be good, especially in a conference like the Big Ten. So that's a pro-style conference. We all know we can run the ball in that conference. But if you have a quarterback to lead your team, that's what sets you apart. I'm really excited about matchup against Ohio State later in the season. I'm not overlooking any games before that. I know we have Oregon early in the season at home, and we play a lot of other quality teams. But I'm really looking forward to a rematch against Ohio State, and maybe more so just following the Big Ten in general this year. I think we're going to have 2 teams that are going to be able to compete for playoff spots legitimately in Michigan State and Ohio State. So it's going to be fun. I was hoping that Wisconsin could have pulled off the championship or Michigan State in the Final Four so the Big Ten would have something to hang their hat on with both national champions after it seems like every year people talk a little bit down on them. But I'm excited for spring ball around the corner for my guys too, looking to repeat as conference champs.
That is Trey Cochran, the defensive backs coach from Wisconsin Lutheran College. Trey, thanks for dropping a wealth of knowledge for me, buddy, and I hope to get you on again.
Yay, Nach, no problem. Any time. And remember, when you come up here to visit, we're getting that ring out, okay?
Absolutely. I will let you know. That way we can have that thing polished and ready to go. I don't think I need to give you my ring size. It should fit, right?
We'll put it on one of the fingers. It doesn't matter if it has to go on your thumb. It's okay.
All right. That is Trey Cochran, ladies and gentlemen.